This is Skip with the Widescreen Gaming Forum, and this is my review of the Corsair SP2500 2.1 channel speaker set. In the review, I go into a lot of detail about the hardware, its design, its capabilities, and also some empirical data on how it performs. I run pink noise through this set, hit it with a spectrum analyzer, and we look at how good of a job Corsair does at creating a reference speaker set. I also look at the other EQ curves that they offer in the package. This ends up being a pretty lengthy review, clocking in at about 15 minutes. So what I wanted to do is go ahead and bring the conclusion, the summary, up front, sort of a too long didn't watch. So in summary, I love this speaker set. It is the best stereo speaker set I've ever heard. The design, the performance, Corsair has really succeeded in creating a near-field monitor reference style speaker set. With just two satellites and a sub, they create a soundscape, a sound field that puts you in the center, focuses the sound at you, the user. It is rich, it's full, it's robust, and like I said, it's the best I've ever heard in a 2.1 speaker set, and probably in any speaker set. If you're into audio, you owe it to yourself to consider the Corsair SP2500 set. That being said, it's not quite perfect. There are two things that I wish they would have done different or better. The cables that come with it are only 6 foot long and they're proprietary, and they may be a little bit on the short side for you. They do offer some 10-foot cables in their store. However, I wish they would just include the 10-foot cables in the current retail box. Secondly, there's no digital input for a coax or an optical input. And while this is certainly not a real detriment for anybody with a PC card because it's going to have an analog out, I think a digital input would have made it much more robust package as a multifunction package so that you could use this with not only your PC, but your cable box, your Xbox 360, or your PS3 if you're in a dorm room or a small apartment or something like that. But bottom line, this is an amazing speaker set. Corsair has done an outstanding job, and it comes highly recommended from the Widescreen Gaming Forum. I have the satellites for the Corsair SP2500. It's pretty hefty, weighs about 2 pounds. It's got two drivers in here. It's got a 1-inch tweeter and a 3-inch mid-range. On the back, you can see the connection here. It uses a power supply style connection. You can see the diagram here. The top two contacts are for the tweeter, the bottom two for the mid-range. The good thing about using this style of connection that's keyed is it means that you can't put it in wrong. And it is particularly necessary to make sure that you would get the connection right in this case because the system is bi-amped. It has a separate amp for the tweeter and a separate one for the mid-range. 16 watts to the tweeter, 40 watts to the mid-range. But they also have different crossover points. So you want to make sure that the right wattage and the right piece of the signal is going to each of the drivers. So it's great that we have a keyed solution here. The downside is that you're stuck with the cables they give you. They're about 6 feet long, which I found a little short. They do offer a replacement 10-foot cable on their website, but I honestly think they should just update the packaging and supply the 10-foot cable in the box itself. Driver sits normally like this. It comes with this little stand here, and you can use that if you have it on your desk to tilt the unit up at you, or if you have it up on a shelf or a ledge of some sort, you can use it here to point the driver down at you. And this is really crucial because this satellite and this whole system is designed as a near-field monitor. It doesn't simply blast sound out across your whole room, letting the signals bounce off of everything and reflect and get muddy. These are designed to create a sweet spot of right where you're sitting, right where your ears are. This mimics the type of monitors, studio monitors, that sound mixers and sound engineers use. So if you're using these, you're getting exactly what the sound engineer had in mind. With the reference style design, the reference style performance and EQing. And Corsair is going to the trouble to try to get these speakers into the hands of audio designers in the game industry. If the speaker is a little too tall to put under your monitors, especially if you're running iFinity or Surround, you can rotate it and save a little room. A lot of bookshelf speakers use this type of landscape configuration. I tried this for a while and didn't have any problems at all. But here is the satellite for the Corsair SP2500. So the next thing we're going to look at here is the control pod. Physically, it has a auxiliary 2 input headphone style jack and a mini USB used for firmware updates, though I haven't seen any of those come down. Then here we have a headphone output that you can use to easily connect headphones. The first selection here is simply volume. Use this dial to rotate up and down. The second one here, or sorry, the last one here is a subwoofer. You can use to adjust that level. Here in the middle is the menu. You'll notice here on the display that there is an icon for the satellites, the sub, and then headphones. So right now I'm in a normal mode, a normal program, and both the satellites and the sub are active. However, if I go to the late night mode, which is pretty cool, it turns off the sub and you can see the little icon goes dark. And this mode routes a lot of the mid-bass frequencies here into the satellite. So you still get a full rich sound without the deep rumbling bass, but you also won't wake up your roommate, spouse, neighbor, kid, or whatever, at least less likely. So I'm going to scroll through these. There's some DSP modes if you're listening to music, so that your music can sound like, possibly a live album in a stadium, a concert hall, a club, a karaoke, dynamic pop, and then a wide setting, which gives you a wider field on the satellites, wider imaging. So here I'm going to go through the EQs. We have reference, and then some music EQs for classical, pop, and jazz. And then Mod X, which is a standard used in authoring DVDs and Blu-rays, so you can now set the EQ to match how your DVD or Blu-ray was mastered. And within that, there are EQ parameters for action and drama. And then some Mod X settings for first-person shooters, action gaming, and then a headphone that will help compensate for usually what's lacking in headphone drivers. If you plug in the headphone, that icon will light up and the other two will turn off. So we'll go back to reference. Here, the setup menu, you have language selection, how long the backlight stays up, and then colors. This is the night setting, which I prefer, and then there's day. And then we will go back to the main menu here. You can see you just use the wheel to scroll, and then you click to select. That's really the one thing that I don't like about this control pod, is that sometimes, if I'm reaching and I am turning, when I go to select and push down, it'll actually turn the wheel and I'll select the wrong item out of the list. The power is here as well, so you don't have to reach down behind the sub and turn it on and turn it off from there. Everything really here is controlled from the control pod, and it works. Here we have the sub enclosure that also houses the amplifiers. It's a big rectangular cube. You can see the port here on the front. You don't see the driver at all. It's not behind a grill or anything like that. This is a fourth order enclosure. It combines a sealed enclosure with a ported enclosure. The driver itself is housed and fires back into a sealed enclosure, which produces tight, crisp bass and is known for its good response. Then the front of the driver fires into the area here, the chamber that contains the port, and that tuned port helps provide a better lower frequency response. It improves the efficiency and allows for better power handling. So you really get the best of both worlds. You combine the sealed chamber with the ported chamber, and having this type of design, going to this length of design, I think really points to the quality and the type of product that Corsair has created here. The unit's pretty heavy. It weighs almost 20 pounds. And we see here the back, we have a standard style power, a connector that's not grounded, another headphone input, RCA inputs, the plug-in for the remote, and then the color-coded right and left satellite connections. The unit does contain the amplifiers. Like I said, there's actually 6 amplifiers in here. There are 2 for the left and right tweeters, 2 for the left and right mid-range, so that's 4. And then the other 2 are 2 60-watt Class D amplifiers that are bridged to provide 120 watts to the 8-inch sub that's in here. So you're actually taking the stereo input signal, bridging that power together to really provide a lot of wattage, a lot of power behind this driver. The one thing you don't see is a digital input. That's one area where I think Corsair missed the mark. In their product literature that they provided for the review, it answers the question of why isn't a digital input offered. And the reason is that, or the reason they give is that there's no reason to do the Dolby Digital or the DTS decoding here. And that for gaming, if you use your SPDIF or coax output, you're bypassing the processing of your sound card, and that you may not get all the positional audio effects and so forth. And I would agree with that logic. Letting your sound card process, do the virtual audio placement, and then output that, as it's decoded it into the stereo mix would be preferred and is preferred. But I do think that this set is perfect for a dorm room or a small apartment to be used as a multi-use. You've got 3 sets of inputs. You can connect multiple devices. I just think it would have been easier for a lot of people that if it had the optical or the coax input to connect something like a PS3 or an Xbox or a cable box, something that's not going to be running through your PC. So I wish they had added that. I understand why for PC gaming you wouldn't want it or need it. But I do believe that it would have made it a more well-rounded product and help it be more multi-use and multifunctional. I was intrigued by the RCA style line inputs. The outputs on my sound cards are the 3.5mm headphone jack style. And so I actually bought a turntable. I've been wanting to get into vinyl and bought a turntable to plug in there. And the experience has really just been phenomenal. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. And next we're going to look at the different EQ profiles that are available.
The best way to show performance of the speakers is to run pink noise through the set and test the results with the spectrum analyzer. I'm using a piece of iOS software called Sound Meter. The developer of that software has provided a graph to show the response characteristics of the iPad's microphone to properly tune pink noise. If the results from the SP2500s are a relatively close match to the green line in this graph, then we know they are indeed producing a reference quality output. Here we are adding the results of the reference EQ setting and sizing the graphs to match. You can see here that the graphs do match fairly closely, even the bump between 5 kHz and 18 kHz. The 2 exceptions are a slight dip centered around 3 kHz and another notch in response at 160 Hz. The sub levels from 120 Hz and down are slightly elevated. This mismatch is due to my setting the sub level too high for the testing. By and large, you can see that Corsair did a great job of reproducing reference quality audio in a consumer package. By way of comparison, here's the frequency response from a Dell monitor soundbar. You can see that the unit underperforms below 500 Hz and is compounded by a spike in response centered at 16 kHz. The audio profile generated by the soundbar produces audio that can best be described as thin, tinny, and bordering on painful. Now hold on, you might say, that's not a fair comparison. The soundbar doesn't have a subwoofer, and you would be right. However, we can show an apples-to-apples comparison between the soundbar and the SP2500s by activating the late night mode. This turns off the subwoofer and routes the mid-bass frequencies to the satellites. You can see here that while the audio profile of the late night mode cuts the bass response, the set still produces a full sound that is both rich and balanced. The small changes you see here on the graphs may not seem like much, but they are. On average, to get 3 decibels of volume increase, you've got to double the wattage supplied to the speaker. If you've got 80 decibels at 10 watts, you've got to supply 20 watts to hit 83 decibels, and then 40 watts to hit 86 decibels, and finally 80 watts to hit 89 decibels. So that 10 plus dB increase at 16 kHz between the night mode and the Dell soundbar, that represents a significant increase in your perception of that sound. The decibel scale is logarithmic, and small changes are actually quite impactful. The bottom line is this. While the difference in the EQ curve between the reference and night mode on the SP2500s and the Dell soundbar might not seem like much, they are light years of difference. And this points back to the fact that Corsair achieving such a close adherence to the reference curve, it is really a big deal. With all of that out of the way, we're now going to look at the Mod X curves. Some of the slight differences between any two curves can be attributed to the nature of pink noise. Pink noise sounds like static and has an inherent fluid nature. However, even in this chaotic soundscape, some changes are evident. With the base Mod X curve, the 125 Hz band appears to have a little jump, and everything above 2 kHz is obviously and consistently tweaked down. This is the action genre tweak of the Mod X curve. In total, it appears to tilt to the right, with a pivot around 125 Hz. That pivotal frequency is dropped, with everything below it being raised, and everything above it being lessened. Everything above 3 kHz has a noticeable drop, above and beyond the change from the reference EQ setting. And here's the drama EQ curve. All the tweaks here are slight, but remember a 3 decibel increase represents a doubling of power applied, and a 3 decibel drop represents a halving of power applied. In comparison to the action EQ genre, the 100 Hz and below frequencies have an obvious drop, while the 2 kHz frequencies and above see a boost. This serves to focus the sonic field on audio frequencies related to the human vocal range. Next, we're going to look at the 3 EQ profiles for music. First is classical. Moving from low to high, we first see a drop in the bass frequencies below 100 Hz. We then see an increase in frequency response from 125 Hz to 250 Hz. Next, we see a softening between 500 Hz and 3 kHz. And finally, we see a boost from 4 kHz up through the end of the spectrum. For pop, we see a general increase at 250 Hz and below, as well as 3 kHz and above. Between those frequencies, 250 Hz and 3 kHz, we see a general drop in response. With the jazz setting, we see the slightest of depressions at 200 Hz and below, with a corresponding increase from 200 Hz up to 500 Hz. On the high end, we see a noticeable increase in response from 2 kHz and up. The FPS setting is designed for multiplayer gaming, with the focus set at communicating with your teammates. Versus the reference baseline, the FPS setting increases the bass and mid-range frequencies while reducing the treble spectrum. The 3 kHz frequency acts as a pivot. Frequencies below it are raised slightly, while frequencies above it are diminished significantly. The action gaming setting focuses on the single-player experience. Without the need to focus on voice communication, it hones in on explosions and weapons fire. Versus the reference setting, it is a boost of the bass frequencies and a reduction of the high end of the spectrum, with 800 Hz being the fulcrum. In case you weren't aware, vinyl records have experienced a resurgence over the last few years. If you're going to buy a turntable, you're in it for the audio quality and you need speakers to match. There are all kinds of reasons to get into vinyl. Maybe it's the re-release of classic albums from one of your favorite artists on a 180-gram audiophile vinyl, complete with remixing by the original audio engineer. Maybe it's the re-release of anniversary editions of seminal albums, complete with remixed and remastered versions, swag along with the release of a long sought-after live session from the heyday of the artist's career. Or maybe like me, you remember when vinyl was still a current medium, even if it was waning a bit. Maybe you remember the care displayed by your parents at placing a record on the turntable. Or maybe you just remember sitting in the living room floor, looking at the album artwork and poring over the work put into the packaging. Maybe you like the ethos associated not only with the current indie game industry, but also the composers making music for those games. Maybe you've grown a little weary of the digital age and like holding something in your hands. Maybe you just enjoy the ceremony of putting a record on a turntable. Maybe it's all the above, and for the record, I'm an all the above. No matter the reason, you need a set of speakers to match your entry into the world of vinyl. For a turntable, I found the Audio-Technica AT-LP120 USB at just above $200. It's a great deck and a steal at the price. The Corsair SP2500s hit the same price point and are an amazing match for the new audiophile. I don't think Corsair has looked at the burgeoning vinyl market as an opportunity, but they should. The
The Corsair SP2500s match perfectly with a solid turntable to provide a full, rich, accurate sound that vinyl fans are looking for. And really, what better praise can you give a set of speakers?